In February of 1935, city workers off East 123rd Street in Harlem pried up a manhole cover, looked down into the runoff below, and pulled a live alligator and about 7.5 feet of it up out of the dark. That's not a campfire story anybody invented. That's the day the American sewer gator stopped being a myth and started being a case file. I've spent a lot of years standing at the mouths of outfall pipes with a flashlight, waiting to be wrong. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. The story we all grew up laughing at, the gator in the sewer, the pet flushed down a toilet, the monster under the street, has a bad habit of turning out to be half true. Not the flushed pet part. That part's nonsense, and I'll tell you why it's nonsense before anybody in the comments beats me to it. But the animal in the drain, that one's real. That one keeps coming up, literally, all over the country. So let me tell you what actually pulls a cold-blooded reptile the size of a grown man down into a concrete pipe. And then let me tell you why the map of where we're pulling them back out is drifting in a direction it has no business drifting. Start with the cold, because the cold is the whole misunderstanding. Everybody assumes an alligator wants to be warm, so it hangs out in a sunny Florida canal and never leaves. And in summer, sure. But an American alligator, Alligator mississippiensis, and that's the only time I'll make you sit through the Latin, doesn't need warm the way you think it does. This animal can ride out water down near 40 degrees Fahrenheit by dropping into a torpor, a kind of slowed-down holding pattern where it barely moves and barely breathes. It can freeze its snout to the surface of an icing-over pond, nose up, and just wait out the season. Now hold that 40-degree number next to another one. A storm drain, buried under a road, insulated by earth on every side, fed by warm runoff and the ambient heat of a city, routinely holds water in the 50s and 60s year-round. In January, when the swamp upstream is colder than the pipe downstream, read those two temperatures side by side because that's the argument in two numbers. 40 degrees is what the animal can barely survive up top. 50s and 60s is what the drain is handing it for free. All winter, no sun required. You see where this goes. The pipe isn't a trap the gator stumbles into. In the coldest part of the year, the pipe is better real estate than the wild. And it gets worse, or better, depending on whether you're the alligator, because these animals dig. In the wild, an alligator excavates what's called a gator hole, a burrow into a bank that can run several feet deep, a shelter it holds and defends and returns to. That's hardwired behavior. That's what the animal is looking for its whole life, a dark, water-filled tube it can back into and disappear. A storm drain is a gator hole somebody already dug. Smooth concrete, constant water, no digging required, no roots, no predators bigger than it is. To a reptile running on instinct, a 48-inch culvert isn't strange. It's home with the hard part done, so the shelter's there and the temperature's there. What about food? Here's where people underestimate the animal completely. An adult alligator can go months without a real meal. Months. It's not burning fuel like a mammal. It's a slow, patient furnace that can idle almost indefinitely. So even a drain that only produces the occasional rat, the occasional stunned fish washed down after a rain, the occasional bird, that's survivable for a long, long time. Longer than your gut says it should be. You're picturing an animal that needs to eat like a dog. It eats like a stone that occasionally lunges. Put it together. Warmer than the swamp in winter, shaped like the burrow it already wanted, feedable on almost nothing. The drain isn't fighting the alligator's biology. The drain is quietly rewarding it. So why doesn't every storm system in the South have a gator in it? Fair question. Let me take the legend apart first because it deserves it. The flushed pet origin story. The baby alligator bought in Florida, brought north, dumped down a toilet when it got too big, growing up feral under the streets. That's the version everybody knows, and it's the version that's wrong. You cannot flush an alligator down a residential toilet. The plumbing won't take it, the pipe diameter's wrong, and a hatchling in 50-degree northern sewage in winter doesn't establish a breeding dynasty. It dies. The doubters are completely right about that, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise to keep a good story alive. But watch what the debunkers do next. They kill the flushed pet myth, and then they act like they've killed the whole thing. They haven't, because the 1935 Harlem animal was real, 7.5 feet of it, and nobody flushed that. Something else put it there. And that something is where this gets interesting. So if it isn't plumbing, what's actually moving alligators into these systems? Two things: released pets and floodwater. The released pet route is real, just not the toilet version. People buy a 2-foot alligator, it turns into a 7-foot problem, and instead of a toilet, they take it to a retention pond, a canal, a storm outfall at the edge of a subdivision, and they let it go. From there, it does what it does. It finds the pipe. That's not a legend. That's Tuesday for a nuisance wildlife officer. Florida runs a nuisance alligator program that logs somewhere between 8,000 and 15,000 complaint calls in a typical year. 8 to 15,000. And a real share of those are drains, canals, swimming pools, storm systems. Sit with that number for a second. That's not a folktale. That's a phone that will not stop ringing. Then there's the flood route, and the flood route is the one that scales. When a storm surges a river over its banks, every alligator in that drainage gets picked up and relocated by the water itself, whether it wants to move or not. After Hurricane Harvey stalled over Houston in 2017 and dumped a biblical amount of rain, alligators ended up miles from their home range, in flooded neighborhoods, in cul-de-sacs, and down into the drainage systems that were the only water still flowing when the streets drained. Houston's a perfect machine for this. The bayous, Buffalo Bayou runs right through the middle of it, feed a storm network, and along those outfalls after every heavy rain, residents report the same thing. Eyes at the mouth of the pipe. 2 little points of reflected light down in the dark at the water line not moving. They report it again and again. Same pipes, same rain, year after year. The drains along that bayou produce gators the way a good fishing hole produces fish. And the network these animals are moving into is bigger than your mind will let you picture. New York City alone runs a combined sewer system. Storm water and waste, same pipes, that stretches more than 7,400 miles. 7,400 miles of lightless, temperature-buffered tunnel under one city. You could not search it. Nobody could search it. There isn't a flashlight budget on Earth for 7,400 miles of pipe. That's the part the debunkers skip. They're right that nothing's breeding down there. They're right the flushed pet thing is garbage. But we've thoroughly checked and it's empty was never on the table, because you cannot check 7,400 miles of anything. So here's the honest scorecard. And I'm going to be straight with you because that's the only reason to trust me on the rest. Is there a self-sustaining underground alligator population beneath any American city? No. There's no evidence for that, and I'm not going to sell it to you. Every animal we pull out was put there, released, or flooded in, or wandered up a pipe from an outfall it entered at ground level. Not a colony, not a breeding dynasty in the dark, but not a myth either. Not a nothing. Because here's what's actually keeping me up. Individual animals surviving in these systems for real right now. That part is documented, and the number of times it happens is going up. And when I lay out the map of where they're being pulled out, the northern edge of it is moving. Follow it with me. The historic line and the reliable range where you expect this, where a gator in a drain barely makes the local news, that's the deep south. Florida, coastal Texas, the Gulf. That's the swamp country, the Buffalo Bayou country. Nobody blinks at a gator in a Houston culvert, but the reports have been creeping up into the Carolinas, where the tidewater drains hold winter temperatures they didn't used to, up the river systems inland. And every few years, a genuine one turns up impossibly far north, and everybody says the same thing. Released pet. Has to be. It's always the released pet explanation because the alternative is uncomfortable. And most of the time, the doubters are right again. Most northern gators are somebody's abandoned pet, and I won't pretend a lone animal in a cold state drain proves a range shift. One gator in a pipe in the wrong state is an anecdote, not a trend. I'll kill that piece of evidence myself. But go back to the 2 temperatures. 40 degrees is survivable up top. The drains hold 50s and 60s, which means the exact reason a northern winter used to be a wall for this animal. The cold is the exact thing the storm systems quietly cancel out. The pipe is a heated corridor running straight through the barrier that used to stop them, so ask the real question. Not, is there a monster under the street? There isn't. The real question is this. If the drains are warmer than the surface and the animal can idle for months without eating and the network is too vast to search and the climate up north is softening the winters that used to kill any gator that wandered too far, then are the storm systems themselves selecting for this animal? Are we, without meaning to, building a heated highway north and stocking it with runoff prey and then acting surprised every time something comes up out of a manhole where it shouldn't be? I don't have a population to show you. Not enough to confirm one. Not enough to dismiss the drift in the map. What I've got is that first case. February of 1935, East 123rd Street, Harlem. A cover comes off and there's water moving in the dark below, cold up top, and warmer down deep, running for miles under a city that has no idea what's in its own pipes. And somewhere down that tunnel, patient as a stone, Something that can wait for months without eating is waiting. Nobody put it in a myth. Somebody has to pull it back out.